danced with a man, who's danced with a girl, who's danced with the Prince of Wales. It was simply grand, he said, topping band, and she said, delightful, sir. Glory, glory, alleluia, I'm the luckiest of females, for I've danced with a man, who's danced with a girl, who danced with the Prince of Wales.
David, if you'll only fight for your rights. You're the King of England and immensely popular with your people. But if you stand up to Mr. Baldwin and the rest of them, your popularity will carry the day.
Yes. Well, I hope you're right.
The people are on your side, David. The ordinary men and women you spoke to in Wales. The Prime Minister can't ignore them.
No, but I mustn't set them against him. And nor must I divide the nation. But short of that, there's still a certain amount to be done, and you may be sure that we're doing it. How are you in Cannes?
Well, but very lonely without you. I know you must be in England now. Well, it's so sad that I can't be there to help you. I know that life was impossible before I left, but it's also very difficult without you.
Yes, well, it was the only thing that we could do, wasn't it?
Yes, I know it had to be.
He won't see me, Alec. He keeps putting me off, saying tomorrow. Tomorrow. But he never sends for me. Could you put in a word?
Well, I'm afraid that he doesn't listen to me anymore, sir. To Walter Monckton, yes. To Winston Churchill these last few days. And, of course, that woman on the telephone, endlessly on the telephone. But not to me.
The thing is, must know what's going on.
Of course, I do understand.
My wife and I must be warned as soon as possible. You see, Alec, the whole fabric may give way under the strain. If I'm to hold it together, I must be warned.
When will this statement of yours appear, Winston?
Tomorrow, in the Sunday papers. A plea asking for time, no more.
That is just what Baldwin and the rest don't want.
But you must have time, sir. If they refuse it, you should imitate your ancestor George III, retire to Windsor Castle and lock yourself in, placing the royal physicians at the entrances to refuse access to your person.
It's a charming idea, Winston, but I think it might be overdoing it a bit. Still, if your statement would achieve a little delay, I should be very grateful.
I plead for time and patience. The nation must realize the character of the constitutional issue. There is no question of any conflict between King and Parliament. Parliament has not been consulted in any way, nor allowed to express any opinion. The question is whether the King is to abdicate upon the advice of the ministry of the day. No such advice has ever before been tendered to a sovereign in parliamentary times.
Come in.
Mr. Winston Churchill, sir.
Ah, Winston. Good of you to come so quickly.
Well, Prime Minister?
This statement of yours to the press, what do you hope to achieve by it?
Time for the King and for Parliament.
There is no time. One way or another, the thing must be settled now before it poisons the whole nation.
He is not fit to decide just now. I had dinner with him last night as a friend, Prime Minister. And as a friend, I urged his staff to call in the doctor.
And did they?
His Majesty appeared to me to be under a very great strain. He had 2 prolonged periods of blackout in which he completely lost the thread of the conversation. Oh, he was very gallant and debonair at the onset, but it soon wore off. And his mental exhaustion was painful to see. It would be a most cruel and wrong thing to extort a decision from him in his present state.
Come in.
Will you see Mr. Walter Monckton, sir?
Yes, of course.
Walter. Sir. Winston.
What's your news?
He means to go, sir. He sent me here to tell you formally that he intends to abdicate.
But I was with him last night and he said nothing.
I was with him this morning, Winston. Will you accompany me to the fort, please, Prime Minister?
Very well, Walter.
So you see, sir, there is a possibility that you could lose both the throne and Wallace.
How, Walter?
Well, the moment you cease to be king, you become subject to the ordinary laws of the land. Now, there is a chance that the decree nisi may be quashed, thereby invalidating the divorce.
But to make sure that this does not happen, Walter has a proposal, sir, and with your approval, I have undertaken to try to put it through.
Yes. What is it?
Well, that there should be two bills, sir. One giving effect to your wish to renounce the throne, and the other one making the decree nisi absolute immediately. In this way, we should leave no loose ends.
But I must warn you, sir, that we can expect some opposition from my colleagues on the grounds that it would injure the marriage laws and give wrongful privilege to the monarch.
But you will support the plan, Mr. Baldwin?
Yes, sir, it seems to me a very reasonable accommodation. If the cabinet rejects it, I shall resign.
Still no answer.
None from him. They say he's in conference. Speak to me later.
They said that yesterday. He'll talk to you later, they said. They said it again this morning.
I wish he'd be straight with me.
The cabinet won't agree, Walter. The abdication bill, certainly, but they declined to allow a bill to make the divorce absolute immediately. There was an outcry about it being one law for the rich and another for the poor, and that to rush the decree through would publicly confirm the worst about Mrs. Simpson.
Who spoke against it?
Chamberlain, very largely. He said the thing would be denounced as an unholy bargain, that it would damage the moral authority of the government, be looked on as a blow to the marriage laws in general, and injure respect for the monarchy.
Yes. I hadn't expected such opposition.
No more had I, Walter. And now I have my promise to keep. I must resign.
The king won't allow that, I assure you. But what he will want is more time to consult his advisors.
How long?
Well, a few days, I don't know. Perhaps weeks.
It's intolerable, Walter. The affair must be finished by Christmas.
Give him time, Prime Minister.
It's not possible, Walter. Many members of the cabinet want the thing settled long before then, Chamberlain in particular. They feel it's holding up important government business. It's even damaging the Christmas trade. And any further delay just gives the Simpson press added opportunity to misrepresent what is happening. Every day that passes before the thing is settled brings fresh perils. You must see that he should be denied these weeks that you speak of.
And who is to deny them to him?
His own conscience?
Wallace! How are you?
How are you, David? What's happening?
Well, Walter's proposal didn't work. The cabinet threw it out. It's all an unholy mess here.
But you said Baldwin was certain they would wait the 6 months.
No, I said he'd do what he could. But it's misfired. So now we shall have to wait.
Wait for what?
Well, to see what happens next.
David, they've turned down the Morgan attic proposal and your request for a direct appeal to the people, and now this. You're letting them tie your hands completely.
Why is it not as simple as that?
I realize I'm out of touch here, but David, please, you mustn't give up the fight.
No. Well, are you happy to stay on in town?
It seems I have no choice.
Well, why don't you ask Aunt Bessie to join you there?
Perhaps I will.
Oh, do, Wallace. I hate the thought of you being so isolated, and she'd be a marvelous support for you. I tell you, I feel like chucking it all and joining you.
No, David, you mustn't. You must stay as long as there's hope. We both have to accept that.
Wallace, I've made up my mind.
David? David, I can't hear you. What did you say? David? David!
Mr. Speaker, it is now my duty to ask the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Prime Minister, whether he has anything to add to his statement of Friday, December the 4th, on the possibility of constitutional difficulties arising from the private wishes or intentions of His Majesty the King.
Mr. Speaker, yes, sir, I am glad to have the occasion to make a further statement on the position. I should tell the House that I have twice had audience of the King since last Friday, and that I have also had a meeting with the Cabinet. While I am anxious for the matter to be finally settled, I am reluctant to force a decision from one who is as delicately and painfully situated as is His Majesty. The King is at present still consulting with his own conscience in an effort to reconcile his private and personal obligations as he sees them with his public duty and the country's good. When His Majesty has arrived at a conclusion as to the course he wishes to take, he will no doubt communicate it to his governments both here and in the Dominions. It will then be for those governments to decide what advice, if any, they feel it their duty to tender to His Majesty in the light of his conclusion. I cannot end this statement without expressing what the whole House feels, our deep and respectful sympathy with His Majesty at this time.
Mr. Churchill.
Mr. Speaker, may I ask my right honourable friend whether he could give us an assurance that no irrevocable step will be taken before the House has received a full statement, not only upon the personal, but upon the constitutional issues involved. If the House resists my claim, it will only add more importance to any words that I might wish to use. May I say that the right honourable gentleman has spoken as rumours. If he is able to give an assurance that the House will have the constitutional issue laid before it, and that no irrevocable decision will be taken before at least a statement is made to Parliament, then this anxiety would not persist. You won't be satisfied until you have broken in, will
Order! Order! Mr. George Lambert.
Mr. Speaker, may I ask whether the Prime Minister realizes that there is a great personal sympathy for him from all sections of the House?
So you must see that as things now stand, there's no way at all, no gesture, no compromise, no subterfuge, no legislation, whereby he can stay on the throne, unless you release him.
I always thought something would turn up. I always thought someone would think of a formula. I thought he had the power to insist.
I fear you don't understand the nature of his position. He cannot, never could insist. There isn't and never has been a formula.
I understand. At last, I understand.
Then you must let him and everyone else know that you understand. We must draft a statement, making it clear to the world and to the King that you have his best interests at heart and are now absolutely offering to withdraw.
Very well.
A declaration that you have no intention of marrying the King.
I should never have left England. I should never have left him on his own.
No, my mind is definitely made up, Bertie. But in London, they think I'm still deciding.
Despite the statement from Cannes? Could you not have told me earlier?
Well, there have been complications, Bertie. But I'm going anyway. I didn't tell you before because I wanted to settle everything first.
Yes. I'm sorry if I seem so impatient. But, David, it isn't all settled for me, is it?
Well, at least it's now certain that I'm going.
Yes, David. But there are still a lot of things to be discussed. Like where you're going to live. What you're going to be known as. The titles. We shall have to do something about all that.
Mrs. Simpson's renunciation, Walter. It's plain, and now it's public, but has it got the King's approval?
Yes, but only because it may stem her unpopularity, but it'll make no difference.
Well, everybody's reading it. A lot of people are saying this means the end of the crisis. She's renounced him, they're saying, and now she'll just disappear.
The King has no intention of being renounced. If she disappears, so will he with her.
So, he still means to marry her, Walter.
Yes.
In which case he should know that yet another affidavit is to be served by a private individual who says that he can prove that the evidence for the Simpson divorce was obtained by fraud and collusion.
Can you disprove it?
Very probably, but I shall have to go to Cannes to consult with Mrs. Simpson.
Oh, the King won't like that.
Why not? I am, after all, Mrs. Simpson's solicitor. I'm trying to ensure that a divorce goes through. No divorce for her, Walter, no marriage for him.
The King won't want to see her harried, T.G. He'll simply see it as more fodder for the press.
The King wants her free. The King must permit me to go to her. He cannot have it both ways.
Well, you try telling him.
I was hoping you would. Oh, just tell him I'm going, Walter, in the normal course of professional duty.
Yes, Walter. Well, tell Goddard that she mustn't be harassed and he's to leave her alone. No, please, Walter, don't argue. She's to be left quite alone. He's come down here and I'll tell him myself.
I know the King forbids it, but the relationship between a lawyer and his client is the most sacred in English law. Even the King cannot come between them. Do you consider it your duty to follow Mrs. Simpson to Cannes?
I do.
Then don't ask my advice, Mr. Goddard. Do your duty to your client and take no notice of the King.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Just one thing more, Mr. Goddard. After all, the lady has issued a statement to the press in which she states that she is ready to give up the King. That being the case, surely the simplest thing to do, and the easiest way to cope with this new affidavit, would be to withdraw her suit for divorce altogether. If, when you get to Cannes, you find her to be of that mind, what will you do then, Mr. Goddard?
I shall obey her instructions, Mr. Baldwin.
Now, I forbade Mr. Goddard going to see you. I don't want you worried anymore. Well, apparently there are complications with your divorce, but they don't warrant him visiting you in Cannes. Well, no. He feels... You see, he feels that your press statements compromised him, and he wanted to consult you about that. I told him you'd be left alone, and he finally agreed. Wallace, I wanted to spare you any more worries.
Could be that just a little more pressure from Goddard would make her say not only that she's willing to withdraw, but that she is now withdrawing.
The King wouldn't accept that.
One final effort, Walter. He must wrestle with himself, as he never has before. And if he'll let me, I will help him.
Good evening, Mr. Baldwin.
Good evening,
Do come
sir.
on.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Not much like the look of that suitcase, Walter.
Yes, he's ready to stay the night, sir, but I can get rid of him if you like.
No, don't let him spend the night. Still, since he's been so kind to come here, he must stay to dinner. Can't let him leave without some sort of hearing.
For the sake of the country, for the sake of everything that the Crown stands for, give up this marriage and stay with your people.
Mr. Baldwin, we've been through this many times before. My mind is made up to go. By your leave, I should like to be spared any more advice.
If you will allow me one last word, sir.
Very well, Prime Minister. One last word. And then we shall talk no more of this. And you shall stay to dinner.
I know, Prime Minister. I've absolute faith that the Welsh problem can be happily solved. But we must show two things. Good sense and goodwill.
We have plenty of both, and they are being applied.
Yes, but they don't know this. Not yet, because they've seen no evidence of it.
They will in time, sir. Rome wasn't built in a day.
Meanwhile, Mr. Baldwin, they feel that they're just being neglected and shrugged off. That all we care for is their coal. We want to pay as meanly as possible even for that.
God knows they have grievances.
Well, you've possibly not been to Monmouth or the Ronda lately. Now it's just streets of empty shuttered shops. Men stand on the roads all day long in dole queues against a background of slag heaps. These men are short of food and clothing as well as work. Well, I went to the Bessemer Steelworks. They tell me a few years ago 9,000 men were employed there. Now it's just a vast derelict area. The men were sitting there, waiting for me. They're sitting on piles of twisted metal.
Thank you, sir.
This is the man we're going to lose.
Well, that was it, you see. I like to think that they felt I cared. That gave some hope.
I know that you and Mrs. Baldwin do not approve of what I'm doing. And I belong to a different generation.
Sir, there are no two people among your subjects more grieved at what has happened than we are. But there are no two people who hope more sincerely that you may find happiness where you believe it is to be found.
Goodbye, Mr. Baldwin.
Goodbye, sir.
But I've already been through what you're suggesting only a few days ago with Perry. We prepared a statement in which I said I was willing to withdraw. The king refused to accept it then. Why should he accept it now?
Well, if the statement was stronger and more forthright, he would have to accept it. But you finally understand the position you're both in.
Yes, I understand.
You sure?
Yes, I understand that I can never be accepted as the wife of the King of England, that I can never be queen.
No more than that, Mrs. Simpson. You can never be any kind of wife to the King of England. If he persists in marrying you, he will have to abdicate.
Yes, I understand.
Well, there can be no compromises or evasions. He must give up you or give up his throne.
I don't think the king will give me up.
Then, if you do not wish to cost him his kingdom, you must give him up.
I don't think he'll accept it.
Well, he would have no choice if you were to instruct me to withdraw your petition for divorce.
Yes.
It could be cancelled, making the marriage impossible.
Yes. If only I could make him believe I was willing to withdraw my petition.
You must. Now, supposing we drafted a statement, Mrs. Simpson. Something like this. I have today discussed the whole position with Mrs. Simpson.
Her own, the position of the king, the country, the empire.
Mrs. Simpson tells me she was and still is perfectly willing to instruct me to withdraw her petition for divorce and willing to do anything to prevent the king from abdicating. I'm satisfied that this is Mrs. Simpson's genuine and honest desire. I've read this note over to Mrs. Simpson, who in every way confirmed it. Signed Theodore Goddard, countersigned Brownlow. And so in view of this declaration, sir, Mr. Baldwin has asked me to convey to you that your ministers are reluctant to believe that your Majesty's decision is irrevocable, and still venture to hope that...
To get Goddard to cancel your petition? But would you really go through with it?
Yes, I suppose so.
But a day or two ago, you were still urging me to fight. Broadcast the people.
Mr. Baldwin wouldn't let you.
Stand up for my rights. Count on my popularity with the country. I thought you still believed in it. Now you say you're backing down, what?
One thing I know now, David. Either you can have me or the throne. Not both. You know that, too. So I'm offering to back down and leave you the throne.
Wallace? Wallace? It's too late.
So it's final.
Absolutely final, Mama.
He's giving up all this for that.
There's nothing at all that you or any of us can do.
Go home to your wife, Bertie. Ask her to pray with you for grace and strength.
Sir David will have what he wants. Or what he thinks he wants.
Sir, certain assurances would be appreciated. Do you agree that your brother may retain his royal rank after he's gone?
I think that would be fitting.
Secondly, do you agree that he may retain the fort to live in if and when he should be allowed to return to England?
If and when, Walter? Yes. He may have the fort.
Thank you, sir. Well, we can now go ahead and prepare the act and instrument of abdication.
I, Edward VIII, of Great Britain, Ireland, and the British dominions beyond the seas, King, Emperor of India, do hereby declare my irrevocable determination to renounce the throne for myself and my descendants, and my desire that effect should be given to this instrument of abdication immediately. In token whereof, I have hereunto set my hand this 10th day of December, 1936, in the presence of the witnesses whose signatures are subscribed.
I will not enter now into my private feelings, but I would beg that it should be remembered that the burden which constantly rests upon the shoulders of a sovereign is so heavy that it can only be borne in circumstances different from those in which I now find myself. I conceive that I'm not overlooking the duty that rests on me to place in the forefront the public interest when I declare that I am conscious that I can no longer discharge this heavy task with efficiency or with satisfaction to myself. I have accordingly this morning executed an instrument of abdication. am most anxious that there should be no delay of any kind in giving effect to the instrument which I have executed, and that all necessary steps should be taken immediately to secure that my lawful successor, my brother, His Royal Highness the Duke of York, should ascend the throne. Signed, Edward Rex Imperator.
No more grave message has ever been received by Parliament, and no more difficult, I may say repugnant task has ever been imposed upon a Prime Minister. My last words on the subject are that I am convinced that where I have failed, no one could have succeeded. His mind was made up, and those who know His Majesty best will know what that means. This house today is a theater which is being watched by the whole world. Let us conduct ourselves with that dignity which His Majesty is showing in this hour of his trial. Whatever our regret at the contents of the message, let us fulfill his wish. Do as he asks, and do it with speed. Let no word be spoken today that the utterer of that word will regret in days to come. Let no word be spoken which causes pain to any soul. And let us not forget the revered and beloved figure of Queen Mary, what all this terrible time has meant to her. And remember her when we speak, if speak we must, during this debate. Above all, let us look forward and remember our country and the trust imposed by our country, and let us rally behind the new king. Stand behind him and help him. And let us hope that whatever the country has suffered by what we are passing through may soon be repaired, and that we may take what steps we can in trying to make this country a better country for all the people in it.
Grief-stricken as we are today, it is our duty to face the future with clear eyes and firm resolve. This, at any rate, is certain, that the prompt action which the King himself has enjoined upon us will best serve the dignity of the throne, reputation of our parliamentary institutions, and the peace, happiness, and prosperity of the British people.
Mr. Churchill.
Nothing is more certain or more obvious than recrimination or controversy at this time would not only be useless, but harmful and wrong. What is done is done. What has been done or left undone belongs to history. And to history, as far as I am concerned, it shall be left.
The gendarmes have assured me there'll be no more occurrences from photographers climbing the walls.
But they're still at the gates.
I'm afraid they are.
So, I'm a prisoner in a 5-star prison.
Should I look for somewhere else?
No, what's the point? It would soon be the same wherever we went. David says that we can't see each other until the decree is absolute. We mustn't even be in the same country. They've taken his kingdom from him, and yet there are some people who would like to take our future happiness as well.
Thank you, Winston, for all your kind advice and helpful suggestions. Very much for the very gallant efforts you've made for me. I only wish I'd been allowed to speak before, not just as a condemned man's privilege.
Condemned men have made memorable speeches.
Well, goodbye, sir.
Goodbye, Winston.
He nothing common did or mean upon that memorable scene.
Oh, there is one more thing, sir. Reith wants to know, by what title shall he introduce your brother before he makes his broadcast tonight?
I had in mind for him His Royal Highness, the Duke of Windsor.
Yes, but what about tonight, sir? Your brother's not yet created the Duke of Windsor. Reith has suggested he should be introduced as Mr. Edward Windsor.
No, Walt, he can't be called plain Mr. Edward Windsor. He can't be announced as His Royal Highness, Mr. Edward Windsor. No, if he's to be royal after he's gone, he's still royal at this moment.
This is Windsor Castle. His Royal Highness, Prince Edward.
At long last, I am able to say a few words of my own. I have never wanted to withhold anything. But until now, it has not been constitutionally possible for me to speak. A few hours ago, I discharged my last duty as King and Emperor. And now that I have been succeeded by my brother, the Duke of York, my first words must be to declare my allegiance to him. This I do with all my heart. You all know the reasons which have impelled me to renounce the throne. But I want you to understand that in making up my mind, I did not forget the country or the empire, which, as Prince of Wales and lately as King, I have for 25 years tried to serve. But you must believe me when I tell you that I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love. And I want you to know that the decision I have made has been mine and mine alone. This was a thing I had to judge entirely for myself. The other person most nearly concerned has tried up to the last to persuade me to take a different course. I have made this the most serious decision of my life only upon the single thought of what would, in the end, be best for all. This decision has been made less difficult to me by the sure knowledge that my brother, with his long training in the public affairs of this country, and with his fine qualities, will be able to take my place forthwith, without interruption or injury to the life and progress of the empire. And he has one matchless blessing, enjoyed by so many of you and not bestowed on me: a happy home with his wife and children. During these hard days, I have been comforted by Her Majesty, my mother, and by my family. The ministers of the Crown
and in particular Mr. Baldwin, the Prime Minister, have always treated me with full consideration. There has never been any constitutional difference between me and them, and between me and Parliament. Bred in the constitutional tradition by my father, I should never have allowed any such issue to arise. Ever since I was Prince of Wales, and later on when I occupied the throne, I have been treated with the greatest kindness by all classes of the people, wherever I have lived or journeyed throughout the empire. For that, I am very grateful. I now quit altogether public affairs, and I lay down my burden. It may be some time before I return to my native land, but I shall always follow the fortunes of the British race and empire with profound interest. And if, at any time in the future, I can be found of service to His Majesty in a private station, I shall not fail. And now, we all have a new king. I wish him and you, his people, happiness and prosperity with all my heart. God bless you all. God save the king. Well, I suppose that we should be able to come back to the fort sometime after we're married. And I should want to know what job is intended for me.
Sir, I think you should give up any idea of returning to England in the foreseeable future.
But surely there must be work for me to do. Well, I don't want to waste the rest of my life, Walter.
Well, I'll do what I can, sir. But you see, there is a strong feeling in many quarters that the people of Britain do feel let down.
No, I don't believe that. Not the ordinary people.
There is something rather difficult I have to tell you, sir. You've been in the habit of telephoning constantly to your brother. Now, I think that these calls will have to stop.
Why?
Well, the king is beginning to find his feet, sir, but apparently it is difficult if you, sir, give him advice which is not always the same as the advice he gets from his ministers.
It all seems very odd to me. After all, the king is my brother. I must be able to speak to him. For instance, I wanted to discuss with him the arrangements for our wedding. As this will be a royal marriage, I expect my two youngest brothers to come and act as my supporters.
I don't think you should expect them, sir.
Why ever not? My mother, my sister. And they will be coming too. Walter, do you mean to say that when Wallis becomes a member of the family, that not one of them will be there to welcome her into it?
Letter. The Duke of Windsor is to have the title His Royal Highness, but his wife is not. A nice wedding present.
Wallis is not to have royal rank. Well, this is a nice wedding present.
But tomorrow, sir, she will be your wife. She will be the Duchess of Windsor.
I think it's particularly mean of them not to give her that. I shall never admit that Wallis is not Her Royal Highness.
With a man